call tonight's meeting of the City of Tacoma Park to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Present.
Councilmember DeBala.
Present.
Councilmember Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember Hanzak.
Present.
Councilmember Small.
Rock on.
So tonight we are starting a little later. The special time is of 8:30 because prior to this meeting, we had our joint priorities special session with the District 20 delegation. And I just want to again thank them for coming out tonight and talking about their legislative priorities, but also how we may be able to work collaboratively with them to meet the city's goals as well. So want to send a special thanks to the District 20 delegation. And so tonight, there are no changes to the agenda. We will start with general public comments. There will be public comments on voting items. Tonight, we have two voting items. The first is the second reading ordinance amending the annual budget to fund a resolution for Tacoma Junction project, FY 2024 budget amendment number 2. The second voting item is a resolution ratifying collective bargaining agreement with ASME. Lastly, we will have a work session, an update on the minor master plan amendment, planning board work sessions, and council discussions. In terms of upcoming meetings, on Monday, December the 4th, there will be a city council administrative function, interviews for city manager candidates. Tuesday, December the 5th, will also be the council may convene an administrative function that is closed to the public, and that also will include interviews of city manager candidates. On I'm so sorry that those happened already. That was on Monday and Tuesday. And so for Thursday, December 7th, just want to remind folks that Hanukkah begins at sunset. On Monday, December the 11th, is the community reception for city manager candidates, and that is from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. The tentative schedule includes a welcome and light refreshments in the lobby, a blue candidate community presentation, and that will be at 7 o'clock, a green candidate community presentation that will be at 7:10, and an orange candidate, because we're not giving names, presentation at 7:20. Then at 7:30 will be refreshments with the candidates in the lobby. On Tuesday, December the 12th, again, all of our administrative sessions regarding the city manager search will continue. We will have an administrative function session on Tuesday the 12th, interviews for city manager candidates. So on Wednesday, December the 13th, that will be our last meeting before holiday recess. We will have a voting session. The first is a council resolution on the minor master plan amendment. Resolution adopting the FY 25 budget priorities and potential tax rate goals, and a resolution, well earned, setting forth dates for the city council's holiday recess. On Wednesday, December 20th, the city council will not meet. Friday, December the 22nd, city offices and facilities are closed through Monday, December the 25th for the Christmas holiday. On Monday, December the 25th is Christmas Day. City offices and facilities are closed for the Christmas holiday. On Wednesday, December the 27th, the council will not meet. And on Monday, January the 1st, 2024, is New Year's Day, and city offices and facilities are closed Sunday and Monday for the New Year holiday. So with that, we're going to jump into our public comments on voting items. And just as a reminder for folks, voting items for tonight includes the second reading ordinance amending the annual budget to fund a resolution on the Tacoma Junction project, FY 2024 budget amendment number 2, as well as a resolution ratifying a collective bargaining agreement with ASME. Are there any comments on voting items?
Good evening, Sachi Vanikle, Khalsa, Ward 2. I read the resolution about the budget amendment for the Junction project, and I saw a number of up to $500,000, and I assume there's some deliberate vagueness in how much you're able to share with the public at the moment, but I would like to know what all could be included in what that's going to be paid for or allocated for. Thank you.
Do you have any public comments on voting items?
Good evening, Jessica Landman, Ward 1. I'd like to comment on the $500,000 that you are going to vote on this evening in order to pay off NDC so that you can bring the junction matter to a close. I am not here to stand in the way of ending the city's relationship with NDC. This is a step that is long overdue. NDC has been bullying the co-op and the city itself for far too long, in my opinion. But as someone who's been involved in the details of this proposed development project for years, I think I can say with certainty that NDC did not live up to its contractual obligation to deliver a development design that met the city's own requirements and specific criteria or the requirements of the county planning board. And that is why the city council adopted unanimously a resolution calling on the planning board to reject NDC's development site plan for a number of specific reasons. And that is why the planning board did reject the plan, principally because the State Highway Administration had refused to issue a permit for it because it failed state highway safety standards. So I will be very pleased to see the back of NDC. And I am delighted that the merchants and the customers of the Tacoma Junction area can look forward to our upcoming holiday fair there and to the Christmas tree sales returning to that area and to parking for Cielo Rojo, which will soon open its doors, I can hardly wait, and to the upcoming holiday fair and to the co-op and the bike shop and every other thriving Junction business having access to the site, and maybe even to a food forest expanding on the back there, and to having a goat mowing event for the hillside out back, and all kinds of great community activities there. But given NDC's failure to live up to their contractual obligations, we as taxpayers, I think, are entitled to a real explanation for why the city of Tacoma Park is going to be paying them $500,000 to sever that agreement. The city is not the party that failed to carry out its responsibilities under this agreement. And the explanation that appears in the staff document and the resolution is very, very light on details. There must be more to that story. So let me reiterate, in my opinion, there should be no delay in severing this relationship with a toxic developer. But if mistakes were made that justify this payment, then residents and voters have the right to know and to hold accountable those who are responsible. And it's really difficult to imagine any other reason why you would be taking this step. And so I do look forward to learning more in future than what is said in this very brief document. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments on voting items?
Arthur David Olson, Ward 4, Herbie Hancock Avenue. I hope the council will adopt Budget Amendment Number 2. I have faith the council has found the best way forward in this matter. I have to have faith of necessity. The public has no information on what neighborhood development company was threatening or on what alternatives the city council considered. And so far, statements on the matter have not mentioned that a payoff is involved and have not mentioned the $500,000 magnitude of the payoff. With the matter resolved, I hope this council will be more forthcoming. If a non-disclosure agreement prevents doing so, I hope the council will let us know that there is an agreement and let us know why it was agreed to. What of lessons learned? First, when voting on junction development, past council members advised folks not to worry about details because each vote was just a step in the process. They also stated that if things went wrong, the city could end the project without financial penalty. $500,000 later, we know this was not so. I hope the council will acknowledge that misinformation was provided to the public. I am confident that the current council will not make such statements about development projects. I hope the council will sweat the details at every step of development projects, the minor master plan amendment, and everything else. A second lesson, the past council decided to lease rather than sell the junction lot. The hope was to be able to shape development by doing so. The effort to shape development failed, while administration of the lease required a protracted series of meetings which the council chose to close. I hope the current council will avoid leases, instead identifying trustworthy partners and turning things over to them. And a third lesson of immediate import. The Junction project started under a city manager who came out of a development environment. To paraphrase a saying about hammers, when your tool is development, every site looks like a project. I hope the council will hire a more well-rounded manager this go-round. Some council members may have different ideas about lessons to be learned. I hope you'll schedule a work session soon to review the Junction project. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments on voting items? Okay. Do we have any virtual comments on voting items? Okay. We're going to move on to general comments. Do we have any general comments this evening?
Good evening. My name is David Reed. As you know, I'm from Ward 2, and I've been engaged in the MMPA issue now for over 2 years. First as president of Long Branch Sligo, and then as a contributor to a number of community organizations. Over the past years, my views on the MMPA have changed now that details have become available. And at this final stage of the review process, I believe 3 basic changes still need to be made. 1, during the planning board's 5th session, a staff member presented a map rendering the zoning changes on Flower Avenue District. That rendering placed a multi-story residential building on the corner of Flower and Carroll Avenues. Being in the upzone Site 23, that building could have a height limitation of 120 feet. The last thing the city needs, I believe at this stage, is a 12-story building overlooking Adventist Church. In short, I believe that the height limit of 75 feet should be mandatory for the entirety of Site 23, which includes the hospital footprint. 2, 6 months ago, I suggested Maple Avenue and Lee Avenues be cut out of the plan area. I now recognize the potential benefits of rectifying height limits on those streets. However, to avoid upzoning displacement, I strongly recommend that the current height and density limits on the avenue remain as currently established. Allowing such displacement would run contrary to Tacoma Park's equity requirements and standards. 3rd, in its 5th session, planning board members stated that neither the staff nor the public had signaled any traffic or parking problems in the Maplewood Erie Center area. One commissioner claimed that most residences have private off-street planning. Hence, they argued, there should be no impediment in increasing the height and density across that entire area of the district. I think that view is delusional. I recommend that height limits for the entire Maplewood Erie Center be set at 35 feet. In an earlier public statement, I congratulated the mayor for the inclusiveness of the city council's resolution. The planning board staff's general disregard for the city's expressed concerns over the course of the 5 sessions makes evident that general requests will be of no consequence whatsoever. I therefore strongly encourage the city council to establish clear conditionalities, not kind requests, which will be required of the MMPA if it hopes to gain the support from the city council. And I suggest that the 3 points I've just mentioned be the basis of those conditionalities. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments tonight?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Paul Hubner, Ward 3. I'm here tonight to encourage you to stand up for your resolution and for the overwhelming number of residents who have publicly stated their opposition to the currently proposed MMPA. Pass a motion and vote no. From the outset, planners and staff from county and city have proposed a monumental giveaway to the developers. And do not fool yourselves into thinking that the #1 priority of the vast majority of developers is not to maximize profits. I can speak from personal experience. working as a project manager for a number of commercial and residential developers when I say that once the commission or board in DC approves such zoning as allowed in their current proposed plan, developers and their attorneys will push for the maximum heights and density allowed by the zoning and will file for a variance even in the light of the zoning itself. Aside from the neglect, disdain, and condescending replies from the planning board and staff, recognize that they consistently refuse to answer, much less comply, with your very own City Resolution 2023-33. Many of their answers revolved around some mythical later date when they will finally heed your needs and resolutions. Studies on the impact to schools, traffic, stormwater management, green space, and most importantly, the effect of our own affordable housing have been flipped on their head and answered by discussions of eliminating our own rent stabilization. As the vice chair of the board admitted, quote, people will be displaced, end quote. We have heard from an experienced, well-known architect, Carl Elefante, who decried the plan as one of the worst approaches to affordability. We have heard from Dr. Paul Krastowski about how the current plan could result in some 141 million pounds of greenhouse gases from construction, making it, quote, impossible for Takoma Park to achieve net zero emissions by 2035, and impossible to meet the city's climate emergency response framework approved in 2020. I close in respectfully asking you to heed the sage words of Councilman Siemens, who cogently synthesized the board's approach to your resolution when he said, recommendations are not requirements. Stick to your resolution and require the board to answer the requirements in your resolution and to put them in writing and in the plan or vote it down. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments?
Good evening. My name's Casey Kostick. I'm a resident of Ward 3, and I live about a block away from the hospital site. I wanted to take a few minutes tonight to share some of my comments on the minor master plan. And first of all, I'll start off by thanking all of you for all of the attention that you have given this so far, and I know you will continue to give this throughout the process. Second, I wanted to share some of my views about the importance of the minor master plan. For 5 years, I represented the City of Takoma Park on the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board, where I worked with other regional leaders on issues related to transportation, housing, and equity. I'm proud of the role that we, as Takoma Park, have played in opposing highway expansion projects and fighting for transit equity and climate issues. It became clear to me throughout this work that as a region, we need to address our housing shortage and that new housing and commercial units must be built in activity centers, vibrant locations that have access to transit and are walkable and bikeable. Takoma Park is exactly that kind of place, a place where we should be aiming to increase housing opportunities so that more people can be part of our great community, a community with great services and access to transit and walking and biking opportunities. Now is the time for us to walk our talk on these issues related to activity centers, housing shortages, transit, and climate change. But we cannot do this without zoning changes. At the hospital site near my house, as I pointed out, I want to see larger buildings. Please do not reduce the allowable sizes in this location where we have a unique ability to add many new housing and commercial opportunities. On Maple Avenue, we should also embrace opportunities to increase zoning density while protecting existing affordable housing, looking for opportunities to increase affordable housing, and avoiding displacement. The no net loss clause in the minor master plan, the proposed and current sizes of the buildings, the development review process, and the protections the city has in place can help achieve this. At the same time, the city can and should look for other opportunities, both in the minor master plan and outside of it, to ensure protections. My time is running short, so I will wrap up by encouraging you to keep focused on all of these important goals, not sacrificing those that are focused on one for another. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments?
Hi, Hi, my name is Ashley Evans, Brookshire. I changed my name recently and keep forgetting. First of all, I want to say thank you for having the meeting later. I know that probably kind of sucks for all of you, but it means I was able to do bedtime with my son and then come to talk to you all, which I normally cannot do at 7:30. So I appreciate this opportunity to address you. I am hoping the council will vote to support the MMPA draft. I believe the planning staff have provided some informative, fact-based responses to the city's concerns, and I'm really encouraged by what I saw. I thought they provided some good clarifications regarding public spaces and the both in where they should be and the fact that the public spaces do in fact need to be accessible to the public. Things like green roofs would not count because that would not be space available to us in the community. I thought it also did a good job, the planning staff also did a good job informing us further about the protections that are available for affordable housing and preventing displacement. They said that they would not be able to approve a development plan that did not adhere to the requirement of no net loss, because then it would not be in accordance with the plan as passed, if it is passed. And I found that really reassuring. I also, something that stood out to me from the public hearing testimony back in, I think, September, was that Montgomery Housing Partners testified on in support of the plan largely, and they are one of the largest providers of affordable housing on Maple Avenue, as I know you all know. And if this plan truly provided a sincere threat to affordable housing, I do not believe they would support it. So I think the fact that the people providing the affordable housing today to our community support this plan is a strong indicator that it will continue to survive and thrive under the changes of this plan. I also thought the planning staff did a great job carefully explaining some of the concerns about traffic and stormwater and climate, and how those will be better addressed under the development review process once we actually have a concrete proposal in front of the county and the staff to review. Basically, I believe that Tacoma Park needs to grow and change if we are going to remain a diverse and inclusive community. And I know a lot of folks in this community tend to talk about trying to keep things the same. I wanted to remind you of a letter that I sent to the council in September that included signatures from approximately 100 community members in support of the minor master plan amendment from Tacoma for All. And basically, I just hope that the council will keep focused on the facts and the expertise of the county planning staff and the city staff and vote to support the minor master plan amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional general public comments?
Hello, Sachivan Clay Khalsa, Ward 2. I'm also here to express support for the minor master plan amendment. In concept, I support for environmental, housing affordability, and equity issues the concept of making more density available closer to transit routes, and our proximity to DC and the region. I'd also support us looking at ways to adopt similar policies citywide, countywide, and across the state. So if we have other opportunities to promote those broader reaching goals, I'd support that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Salim Firth. I'm in Ward 1. I'm also here to support the MMPA and to urge you to instruct the county to move forward with good consideration of the recommendations the council's brought. I agree with the previous speakers. This will enhance affordability, especially for younger people who are in a middle income bracket. We've got rent-controlled housing, and most of those units are occupied with very long tenures. People have been there for a long time and are glad to have those units. It's not a lot of turnover. It's not a lot of opportunities. And then we've got great single-family homes, many of them historic, that are very expensive now. I think my house is probably appreciated about 50% since I bought here a few years ago. And my brother looked at moving to Tacoma Park, and he, a few years after me, could not afford to live near family. That's just not an option in his budget. And creating new market rate housing in a multifamily context would not be as cheap as the rent-controlled stock that we have, but would be far less expensive than homes like mine. And it would let people like my brother who's starting a family, or people who are looking for a place to live as a single earner in the DC region, realistically afford a place to live in a community that I'm proud to call home and would love to share with more neighbors. And I agree that This will make it much easier in the long run for our city and our region to reach its climate goals. It's not realistic to think that building houses in Germantown or Frederick County is the way for Tacoma Park to contribute to solving a climate emergency. So I thank you so much for your attention to this important matter, and I urge you to vote to approve the MMPA.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments? Okay. Seeing none in the room, do we have general public comments virtually? Okay. Denise Jones.
Yes, thank you. So good evening, Mayor Searcy, council members, and city staff. I'm Denise Jones. I live on Maple Avenue, Ward 5, and I'm here tonight to address my concerns about the minor master plan and the encroachment on Maple Avenue. I've heard a lot, well, we've had many community meetings where you've heard the concerns of opposition to the minor master plan in some iterations, particularly Maple Avenue and the Flower Avenue district. I think there are very few people in the city who object to the plan to do development on the hospital site. But it is pure gobbledygook to be talking about Tacoma Park contribution to the environment. We already do a lot on the backs of the people, the diverse population that lives along Maple Avenue and Flower Avenue. I am sick and tired of people dissembling when we are actually talking about a gentrification and displacement plan. I look at you, my city council, as the bulwark. I expect you to be the bulwark and not be so namby-pamby tiptoeing around your objections to the plan. I know that there is some balance you are trying to achieve in higher taxes, the tax revenue rather, but you absolutely know that this is a displacement and gentrification plan. And for the many white people who are talking about it in other terms, I find it highly offensive. Because what you are saying to me and my neighbors is, you don't care about us. When you talk about increasing the diversity, I guess you're talking about the wealthy, because you would be displacing all kinds of people who look like me, who have lived here in this city and contributed to it greatly. I felt it was important for me to speak up this evening because you need to see a face of someone who understands thoroughly and is willing to speak out on it. And I am asking you to actually do your job and be the bulwark for people who live on Maple Avenue and in the Flower Avenue district. It doesn't have to happen here in Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other virtual commenters tonight? Okay, great. So we're going to move on to council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to say that on a personal level and as a legislator, I just sincerely and completely appreciated the tone of every single commenter tonight. It's more fair, and I thank you. I would like to return to that theme in a minute, but I did want to have a shout out for our really amazing rec department because over last weekend on Friday, they had their first old school, new school basketball extravaganza. And so they cooked hot dogs and other things, and they engendered a lot of adults to give it to a bunch of kids playing basketball. Initially, it was going to be locked at kind of at the 8th grade level, and there's a developing cadre of hoopers that really wanted to play, and they opened it up, and then they had a really great time. So I wanted to shout out, in particular, Miss Renita, who sits at the desk while we have to be in here all night as the planner of it. And I hope that, as an aside, she said something to me about how she'd like to do it at least once a month and conceivably weekly. And I would be in support of that. So I don't know if anybody told her boss that or anything, but I just, as an aside, she just said it to me, and I think it's a good idea. Additionally, now returning to the other topic, I'd like to talk a little bit about reason and democracy, and by talking about how density, traffic, the Purple Line, and the autonomy of the landowners here, all the issues that are swirling around this. And so we have race in and out of the issue. We have economics in and out of the issue. We have opportunity in and out of the issue. But what I do think is I appreciate the fact that it's possible to have a conversation in which we reach a conclusion that may not satisfy everyone, but does indicate that policy or opinions were respected. And so I would hope that that is the case. I'd just like to say there are a couple of people who are talking about issues pertaining to this that seem eminently reasonable to me. And I hope that as we go through the information here, that in the balance of things, we think about the opportunities associated with an expanding middle class opportunity here. It's hard to think about because it's been so long since we had one. But in theory, given where things are, the opportunity to put more middle class, hopeful families to take advantage of the profound balance in the schools and all the other things is potentially there. And I would just like to say that it would make sense to just be considered and measured in the opportunities that we should be creating. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Any other council comments? Councilmember Gibson.
Yes, I just want to, as Councilmember Small indicated, I want to say my appreciation for the commenters. What it said to me was that I guess what I heard was that everyone that spoke wants to have a better Tacoma Park, wants to protect people from being displaced, wants to include new people, wants and to increase some density and some development, and wants, I believe, most want to protect the environment and are concerned about our traffic. The fact that I'll call it a fact, or at least my observation, that all of those people that have spoken and through the months that we've heard them, there is a general consensus that we want a better Tacoma Park with more opportunities and to protect the values and the people that live here. And the fact that we're still torn about this issue is that it is so complicated. It is not an easy one. And I appreciate everybody's efforts to make that. I feel that there is some middle road here. I will oppose the minor master plan as written right now, but I do think that we can make some protections. We can reduce some zoning in certain areas and have the goal and reach toward the goals that I heard just about everyone speak about. I hope that's the case, and I thank you, everyone.
Okay. Any other council comments? All right, seeing no lights. So I just want to thank everyone for all of the fun activities that happened over the course of this weekend. Unfortunately, I'm better now, but I've been nursing a little bit of a cold. So I'm better now. You don't have to move. But what that meant was that I was doing my public health service by staying at home this weekend. But I do want to thank all of those, Pajama Rama, the basketball game and the like, for everyone doing so many wonderful activities this weekend for the community. I do want to spend a little bit of just a moment to thank everyone that has come out tonight to provide comments on all of the topics that we'll be discussing tonight. I think it's important for us to one, appreciate and recognize everybody that comes in and provides feedback. And one of the things that I've said before is, especially around the Tacoma Junction resolution, is when I could tell you, I will. And I've tried my best to be, and this council has tried its best to really operate under the guise of the best interests of the city in an attempt to really try to ensure that we're able to bring everyone back together. The point around the minor master plan that I do want to address is, I appreciate we've heard comments tonight and they were split on both sides, right? And to Councilmember Gibson's point, that it's a complex issue, and it's not limited to the plan, right? There's all of these other. A commenter tonight brought this up. There are so many factors that are within the city's authorities to do. There are factors that are within the county's authorities to do. There are factors that are just simply due to the process in which zoning versus an actual development of a site plan happens. Like, all of that comes into play. So it creates a lot of challenges with really trying to visualize or anticipate what could potentially or may never eventually happen, because the plan is just that, a forecast. I do want to make sure that we are continuing to not allow things like the minor master plan or things like the junction did to divide us as a community. I think tonight's points of comment were a really great way for us to be able to disagree and express our thoughts in a respectful way. And so my hope is that as we are continuing to deliberate on the minor master plan, that folks keep in mind what I said before. This council is really trying to operate in the best interests of the city. And again, we all may differ in terms of the path to realize those goals, but that is the effort that we are putting forward tonight. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming out. Really appreciate you all coming out and sharing your views. And definitely, please, inform your council members if there's any added thoughts that you have. But I do just want to stress that our members of council have been toiling for months on the minor master plan. So we are not entering into this decision lightly, and then we're not entering into this decision without lots of thought, lots of meetings, lots of resources, lots of meetings, and did I say lots of meetings? To really try to make sure that we have a firm handle on not just what the plan says, but what the planning board's capacity to influence or change things. And then more importantly, what are the prioritization of the goals that we have as a city in terms of how this plan may actually be able to address them. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Eubanks, who will be going over our city manager comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, all. Updated information concerning the library renovation can be found on the city website. This page is updated regularly with next steps. A link will be posted in tomorrow's city manager comments, or can be found by clicking the announcement on the city's homepage. This Friday, December 8th at 7:30 p.m. in the Community Center Auditorium, there's an opportunity to enjoy The Sounds of Silence, a film screening with Peter Tavalin. Mr. Tavalin is bringing a modern musical sensibility to the original moving image as he improvises a live score to accompany the silent film Steamboat Bill Jr. This classic Buster Keaton film is an icon of American comedy and features the most famous stunt of the era, with the 2-ton facade of an entire house crashing to the ground around Mr. Keaton. The city clerk's office is accepting applications to fill mid-year vacancies on city boards and committees. There are vacancies on the Arts and Humanities Committee, Board of Elections Commission, on Landlord-Tenant Affairs, Emergency Preparedness Committee, Ethics Commission, Grants Review Committee, Recreation and Community Engagement Committee, Sustainable Maryland Committee, and the Tree Commission. The application form is available on the city website, and a link will be posted with the city manager's comments. Board and committee members are eligible to receive a stipend of $40 per meeting attended. The application deadline is Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. Contact your city council member or Jesse Carpenter at 301-891-7267 or Jesse C. at tacomaparkmd.gov with any questions. A reminder from the police that evening temperatures are regularly dropping below freezing now, so please plan ahead with extra layers of clothing when spending time outdoors, and have winter emergency kits ready in your car in case of troubles. Also, don't forget your pets. They can get frostbite very easily on the ears, tails, and paws. Along the same lines, please note the following Montgomery County numbers in case you or someone you know needs help. There are quite a few, so please bear with me. Community Crisis Center, 240-77-4000. Homeless Info Line, 240-907-2688. Tacoma Park Police Non-Emergency, 301-270-1100. Montgomery County Police Non-Emergency, 301-279-8000. And Animal Services Division, 301-279-8000. City passport services have been moved to the third floor of the community center. Services will continue to operate by appointment only and can be scheduled by calling 301-891-7204. Please note that this is a new phone number. Passport hours are Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And finally, tomorrow, December 7th at 10 a.m., the city will celebrate the completion of the 7402 Garland Avenue Habitat for Humanity Joint Project. This is one of two projects that the city began in circa 2020 to purchase and provide funding for the rehabilitation of single-family homes to residents at or below 80% AMI. The city committed a combination of funding from its Housing Reserve Fund and state funds to support the project, and very glad to see that coming to completion. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. All right, so we're going to move on to our voting session.
So moved.
All right, so the first item for the vote is the second reading ordinance amending the annual budget to fund a resolution on the Tacoma Junction project, FY 2024 budget amendment number 2. Would someone like to move an ordinance amending the annual budget to fund a resolution of Tacoma Junction?
So moved.
Councilmember Small, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens. All those in favor, we don't have to do a roll, so we need to do a roll call. Yep. Would the clerk please call the roll? I'm going to get this right by the time I'm out of here. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy?
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher?
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Hansack?
Yes.
Councilmember Small?
Rock on, and yes.
All right. So the second reading ordinance amending annual budget to fund resolution of the Tacoma Junction project has moved. Next item in our voting session is a council ratification of the ASME 3399 collective bargaining agreement. Would someone like to move?
I'd like to move it.
Thank you. Councilmember Siemens, do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Councilmember, hold on. Councilmember Hansack, seconded. I heard you, but I heard her on the mic. All those in favor of the
Mayor,
resolution?
can we discuss this for a second?
Sure.
I just wanted to say I am infinitely impressed with the leadership that was shown on these issues, and the opportunity to not have to do the acrimonious things constantly is a real benefit to all parties involved. And so I just wanted to thank everyone for doing it.
Councilmember Fulcher?
I want to echo some of the same thoughts. I really appreciate that this is an agreement for 3 years and that it's where we want to be as a community to just get along better and to not be in constant negotiations. And I really appreciate the efforts from staff to get us there. So thank you.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. Along the same lines, I want to make sure that when we talk about thank you to the leaders, it's leaders not just in the city staff, but it's also leaders in the union to be able to bring this together. And as was said, to make it a 3-year agreement so that the city is not in perpetual negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to echo my colleagues' sentiments. This is something that has been an issue for as long as I've been on council. The fact that we are in constant union negotiations, and it creates this tension between staff and city management, where it often leaves levels of mistrust. And so I do want to thank our city leadership, Mr. Eubanks, Mr. Boduck, our HR director, as well as, the ASME leadership, because this has been a long time coming. And for it to have been done based on a spirit of trust is a true testament for how this team has been really working to try to advance and change and modify the culture and morale within our city. And so I'm definitely excited about the possibility of us moving forward with this resolution that allows for us to not only have a better ability to gauge our staffing cost in the future, because it's a 3-year contract, but it also allows for there to be a little bit more free talk, where we're not always at the negotiating table. It can always be one that is built on relationship building and trust, and really trying to get us to that next level as a community. So I want to, again, thank everyone that has been involved in this process to get us to this point, because this is one of the things that's often not really, it's not really sexy. But these are the types of efforts that can really, really, really transform how our staff work, how they feel, how they interact with you, as well as aspects of our budget. So to be able to accomplish something like this is a really big deal. So with that, seeing no more lights, now this one I can just do all those in favor, correct?
You can.
I'm sorry,
Given that Councilmember Gibson
We
is
need to do a
online,
roll
maybe
call.
we should do a roll call.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Honsack,
Yes.
Councilmember Small.
Yes, yes, y'all.
All right, so now we are going to get on to the main event. Update on the minor master plan amendment, planning board work sessions, and council discussions. We've slated this discussion for 60 minutes. And no, go ahead. That's fine. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Eubanks to introduce the discussion. Just for my colleagues, everyone should have in your packet the matrix of the feedback that was the responses to or recommendations to the council resolution from the planning board. So just want to make sure that folks are aware that you do have that matrix in your deck.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll begin this evening's conversation with a brief presentation by Acting Director Cowler and Planning Manager Rosalind Grigsby, who are just going to recap primarily the last planning work session, which was the last of all work sessions. Acting Director.
Thank you so much. Madam Mayor, members of council, Ira Cowler, Acting Director, Housing Community Development, and I'm pleased to be joined tonight by Rosalind Grigsby, our Community Development Manager as well in the department. We have a much shorter presentation for you tonight, but plenty of time for questions as we work towards this resolution of the minor master plan. So Ms. Grigsby and myself will kind of tag team this presentation, but we'll hope to be brief. So I'll rush through some of these first slides, which are things that we've seen already, but just important context. Firstly, as we saw last week, just a reminder of the full timeline for the minor master plan process started in 2021. We're here in the middle of the planning board review process. At the end of that process, we then have the county council public comment and review period as well before we get to an adoption. I'm always afraid to put dates on these slides, but let's tentatively say kind of spring of 2024 for a county council approval of the minor master plan is the goal. Again, so we have been in the process of the planning board work sessions here for a period of about 2 months now. These work sessions began at the end of the public comment period when the public and the city council provided feedback on the planning board public hearing draft. That feedback was provided up until the end of September, and for city council, your feedback was memorialized within resolution 2023-33, passed on September 13th. And so that is the resolution that has been kind of the guiding document for the planning board as they have gone through their work sessions and through the work sessions made edits to the plan itself in preparation for transforming the public hearing draft into the planning board draft of the plan. Just again, very briefly, Resolution 2023-33 included 4 sections. The first one reaffirmed your earlier resolution, 2023-16, which had a few questions, comments already in it. It then outlined 4 main topics, which we will get into during the rest of this presentation, but I will read them out loud here because they are kind of important, again, guiding lights here. Potential redevelopment of the Washington Ventus site and the Flower Avenue district. Secondarily, promoting a diversity of housing in the area. Third, public space infrastructure and amenities within the minor master plan amendment. And lastly, protecting existing housing affordability in the minor master plan amendment. And then in addition to these work sessions, there were a few additional plan requests, primarily kind of language and clarification questions. And then lastly, independent from this, but as a part of the process, planned city council work sessions that would be held during this period. All right. So to jump into the planning board work sessions, again, this is a timeline you saw last time prior to the November 30th meeting, but this is the outline of the planning board work sessions to date, as well as kind of the scheduled final planning board work session here next Thursday, December 14th, where the planning board is scheduled to hold a vote to approve the planning board draft plan and then transmit that to, it says county council, county executive, also transmit it back to the city council as well. Okay, so lastly, just to kind of quickly review how the work sessions have worked and also the documents that you have in front of you right now. So as we discussed last week, the planning board has reviewed the draft plan in order by chapter. And while reviewing the plan, planning board staff have presented a summary of the chapter to the board, take questions and comments, and then for each chapter, staff have presented relevant public comment and or relevant portions from resolution 2023-33 and solicited changes from the board. All of the changes that are kind of proposed or discussed during that planning board work session are then kind of reviewed at the subsequent work sessions. At the subsequent work session, the final language is then presented to the planning board, confirmation, edits are made, they move ahead. And I just real quickly wanted to point out, the planning board has kind of, due to the fact that this is a somewhat unique process where there is a municipality here involved in this planning process, right? This is not a traditional kind of county-wide planning process. The planning board did make some changes to their process. One of those was actually delaying that final vote on the actual public hearing, the planning board draft of the plan. Traditionally, that would kind of happen at the end of the last work session. They decided to delay that until this subsequent work session on the 14th so that you as council can kind of provide your reactions to the changes. And in addition, they have provided you with kind of two unique documents. One is the table that you have in front of you, which is a breakdown of all of the responses during the work session to your resolution, all of the items in your resolution. Last week, you saw my attempt and our staff's attempt to kind of break those down as we kind of listened to the work sessions and understood them. The document you have, and that is posted with the agenda here tonight, is from the planning board staff themselves and is the kind of official planning board response to each of your resolution items. So take that as gospel, not our summary last week. And the other thing you've received is an initial red line version of the updated plan. It is going to include the things that you see in the table. And I just wanted to thank planning staff for providing that for us. That is a document that they normally kind of provide next week in preparation for the final plan, and they were able to rush that so that you have that in front of you and have the time to look through that as you prepare for your vote next week. So with that, we have structured the conversation tonight very simply, just focusing on your four main topics within Resolution 2023-33, highlighting some of the main pieces and requests within those topics and highlighting the responses to date to those. So first topic, I will turn over to Ms. Grigsby to go over.
Good evening, Rosalind Grigsby, Community Development Manager. The first main theme that the council highlighted in Resolution 2023-33, sorry, you set me up already and I messed it up, was the potential redevelopment of the Washington Avenue site and the Flower Avenue district. So as Acting Director Cowler mentioned, the matrix you have in front of you goes point by point through the resolution council passed and the planning staff's response to it. We are not repeating that tonight because you need more time to discuss this among yourselves. So we're highlighting some of the key things that we think need to be called out under each topic. So one significant point on the council's resolution was about scale of potential development abutting residential properties. And the planning staff gave a lot of information, and in the red line version included a table, which is page 22, that it elucidates the zoning, and it includes the visuals they presented at the fifth work session on abutting and confronting properties and how setbacks and step downs work. So they heard the concerns and they responded. In many ways, the zoning code itself has requirements and protections that I think are complex and not necessarily easy for us to see and understand, but I think there's a lot of meat in there. So in section 4.3.2.1 on land use zoning for the Flower Avenue district, they specifically add protections for Maplewood Avenue and about maximum building height conforming to the compatibility required of the zoning ordinance. So they heard and responded to the concerns about those residential streets that are adjacent, that are across from some of this new CRT zoning that's proposed. I'm sorry, the Maple Avenue page, so we'll talk about it again, is, I think it's page 90, It's page 102 in the red line version. So when they did the matrix, they hadn't completed the red line version, which we just got this afternoon. So I wanted to add in some of these more detailed explanations. The second major topic for this theme is the public space and open space requirements. And they highlighted that the optional development requires public open space. They gave some clarification in response to council's concerns about the 35% green roofs and did that count as open space. They clarified their definitions. Open space is publicly accessible, usable space, and that there is a requirement for every optional development project that goes through. They also specifically called out Hospital Hill, the intersection of Maplewood and Maple Avenue, that be preserved to the maximum extent practicable. And the council had asked about the half-acre open space on the hospital campus. So they specifically added that it be open to Flower Avenue as well. So there's the visual space element. And that they also are asking for I think of it as an overlook, the walkway at the back of the hospital campus along Sligo Creek. So that would also be public space, that there would be a walking trail for people who would have a view of the creek and the beautiful asset of Sligo Creek. They called out specifically about co-locating public facilities. I know the council was concerned that that happened, and they have in section 3.1.2, the public facilities section in the report, and they specifically called out public uses and public community uses and public space, public services, excuse me. And then they gave a little more detail on what that would look like for police or what that would look like for recreation. Schools are listed among those points, but they give more detail in the excuse me, I'm stumbling, in the plan itself, and recognize that matters to the city and that the co-location possibilities are important given our very limited space in other ways. And the last point on this topic is about the development review process. So many of the things that council heard from the community about concerns of traffic, concerns of school impact, concerns of environmental impact happen at the development review stage. And the county received a presentation from council received a presentation from the county planning staff about the development review process after you had submitted your resolution. And so some of that was clarified then. They specifically called out and are quite committed to the idea of the full sketch plan for the hospital campus. And the importance of that is that it gives a comprehensive view instead of piecemeal development review projects coming in without an understanding of the full impact. They want it all to come in as a concept in a sketch plan, even if the individual pieces happen later on, so that the city, the council, the planning board all have a sense of what that broader picture looks like. And I will turn it back to Acting Director Cowler.
All right, thanks so much, Roz. So moving on, the next topic in your work session, promoting a diversity of housing in the plan area. A few kind of changes to the plan of note here in line with your recommendations. One was there was a few pieces in the resolution asking for additional incentives, additional resources around how to promote a diversity of housing, how to incentivize certain types of housing within the plan area. And, I think this one is an interesting recommendation that gets to a lot of what I know we discussed last week and can discuss today as far as kind of what can happen within a plan and what happens outside of a plan, right? So the plan doesn't necessarily provide direct funding for the city, the county, anyone else to, create a new funding package to incentivize a certain type of housing production, right? So what the plan can do is, and what the planning board is now proposing to add to the plan is a housing resource list that outlines what those existing incentives are, outlines, I believe, kind of potentially what some of the gaps are, what kind of some of the opportunities to explore might be as well when it comes to resources to incentivize housing. The next was questions around infill development opportunities. Again, this is something I know we discussed last week, but one of the new additions to the plan are sample infill massing plans to kind of demonstrate what the proposed new zoning density within the plan area would do to allow for infill development. And so what those massing plans demonstrated was that on a lot of Maple Avenue, in particular, you have open underutilized space on parcels that can be used to backfill additional density. And then lastly, and I know a big point of discussion, was this question around the appropriate balance of commercial and residential density, specifically commercial and residential FAR in the Maple Avenue district itself. So just for additional context, the plan currently proposes balanced CRT zoning. So, within the language, you see CRT 2.5, C 2.5, R 2.5. We've released some blogs on what FAR is and what those densities mean. But, broadly speaking, what that means is that you can have a entire floor area density of 2.5 on the site. You could have that be a 2.5 commercial FAR or a 2.5 residential FAR, right? So there was a request to kind of understand the impact, potentially explore changing, modifying those FAR breakdowns to account for the residential nature along Maple Avenue. And there was a discussion of this at the planning board, and within the plan you see here, the proposal is not to change those FAR numbers, but instead to add explicit language within the plan that comes up during any development review process around the residential nature of Maple Avenue. So I real quickly just want to read the language and then talk through very briefly what that means, and we can do more during follow-up. But the language within the plan that's being proposed to add: while the plan recommends a diversity of residential and non-residential land uses in the Maple Avenue district, the overall development patterns should remain primarily residential. So this is a recommendation within the plan. If this plan gets adopted with this language within it, what this means is that any potential development project within the plan area needs to demonstrate not just conformity to zoning, not just to CRT 2.5, height, blah, blah, blah. It also needs to demonstrate substantial conformity to the plan itself and the plan recommendations. So we can get into more detail again as to what substantial conformity means, but what it means is that during development review, a plan has to demonstrate adherence to all the plan recommendations, including this one. So both the planning board in their review would take into account how much a project is adhering to this recommendation that development patterns remain primarily residential, as well as City Council, when you weigh into development review, your recommendation or non-recommendation of a plan, which needs to be voted down by a supermajority of the planning board, would also kind of be weighted based on these recommendations, this one included. So I'll end it there, and we'll keep moving, and I'm sure we'll come back to it.
I just have a question about what you just said.
For public facilities, public space, infrastructure, and amenities was the next major topic for the council resolution. The council had asked about impact on schools, traffic, environment, and the matrix that you have from county planning staff goes into quite a bit of detail about that. We wanted to highlight particularly three things: the public facilities, I mentioned that in regards to the Flower District as well, and the usable green space. So the county planning staff in the red line version has added language, particularly for the intersection of Maple and Sligo Creek, what we think of as that area by the Essex House. Specifically identifying that it's not developable, but that there might be, a orchard, forest, there are areas that could be outside the environmentally sensitive parts that could be picnic tables and benches. And they're trying to clarify the activation of the space through events. And the parks representative was discussing that at the work session 5, but recognizing that it's an important and sensitive area, offering new protections in the red line version, as well as some clarification for Opal Daniels as possibility for a community garden or park of some kind, and then the Tacoma Piney Branch local park and the importance of that to the city, and strengthening that if something happens at Piney Branch, if the school gets rebuilt, if that site gets developed, that there be a lot of attention on protecting that park. The last thing we wanted to flag was the schools, and Resolution 2023 did not specifically name a goal of what the council was thinking about for the schools. I think that if the council wanted to look at strengthening what you might identify as needs for Piney Branch Elementary School in particular, I think you could address some of the long-standing constraints, inadequacies, and inequities by asking that the minor master plan itself prioritize construction or rehabilitation for Piney Branch Elementary School to bring it into conformity with MCPS standards. So I'm sure we'll have more discussion, but I'll turn that back over to you.
Thank you, Roz. I feel like we're kind of laying a few little nuggets here for us to explore later. So the last topic within your work sessions, protecting existing housing affordability in the minor master plan amendment. And there were a few substantial, I would say, kind of language changes and strengthenings based on council's request in this topic. So I just wanted to outline a few here. One is displacement protection. So there were a few requests, directives within your resolution around how to kind of protect existing tenants in the event of redevelopment, rehabilitation, anything for their existing residential properties. So language has been added to the plan. I'll read the language again out loud here. In the event of redevelopment, priority should be given to existing eligible residents for the right to return. Property owners should work with DHCA, the city, and tenants to minimize displacement and ensure eligible residents receive support and assistance to mitigate the impacts of temporary relocation. So again, much like the prior commercial residential kind of residential character of the neighborhood recommendation, similarly for this as well as the next recommendation that we'll get to, these are recommendations that a plan is then held to that standard during a development review process. A proposal is held to that standard during a development review process. And again, we've talked about kind of what can be done within a plan, what needs to be done outside of it. That's what a plan does, right? It outlines, or that's what a master plan does. It outlines kind of the boundaries for what is looked at during development review and what standards of development is held to. So that is displacement protections. Next, no net loss of affordable housing. I just wanted to read here the language, a portion of the language. There was actually several pieces of language that have been added to the plan, but this is what I've included here. In the summary, no net loss of affordable housing requires that all affordable housing units, both naturally occurring and income restricted units lost through demolition, be replaced or rebuilt. And again, there's also additional language on how that enforcement is accomplished within the development review process. So the plan provides additional details now on kind of what that looks like and how that happens. And I just wanted to point out, I believe it was Councilmember Fulcher's question last week about what kind of affordable protection meant in no net loss. So I just wanted to point out here, it outlines both naturally occurring as well as income restricted units. So again, as we've talked about in the past, 99% of our units on Maple are naturally occurring affordable or deed restricted, income restricted affordable. And lastly, I'll point out this was not something within your resolution, but kind of in the discussion of housing diversity, of protecting kind of quality housing, the planning board had a discussion about financing housing and about the impacts of rent stabilization, the impacts of other policies on creating housing. And they said, wow, maybe we should kind of put in some language in here about Tacoma Park's rent stabilization law and some things they should look at. So there's some proposed language around the city's rent stabilization. And to Roz's point, from earlier, as you look at your resolution and look at if there's maybe some conditions or things that you want to ask be changed about this draft plan, certainly as we talked about before, the plan can't enforce any changes in rent stabilization. That is the purview of the city. But also, we as staff feel like this probably is not the appropriate place to kind of address rent stabilization either. And so considering removing that, asking for removal of that language might be useful.
I've said on multiple occasions to members of council, I'm not using this to opine on county laws, and I don't need them to opine on ours.
That's what I'm saying.
So that's that.
Thank you. So I believe that's it for our main points here. I just briefly wanted to kind of summarize, remind all of us of next steps here. So we have a work session tonight with the goal of on next Wednesday, December 13th, having a voting session on a resolution in reaction to the work sessions. Immediately after that, on December 14th, is the scheduled planning board meeting to vote on the planning board draft of the plan, advance it to county council, county executive, city council. And then after that, December through kind of February-ish would be the county council review process. And again, this would include another public comment period, public hearing, work sessions, opportunity for council to provide a resolution to the county council. I believe that public hearing would likely, as we mentioned last week, be here in the city for residents to attend, provide comment to the county council themselves, and then again onward, here I didn't put a date, approval and adoption of the minor master plan amendment. And again, wouldn't do my job if I didn't direct everyone to the website where we've got lots of great blogs and additional information on the plan itself.
Wonderful. Lots of lights. Councilmember Small, hold your point. Councilmember Fulcher.
I just want to thank you both for the outstanding job you've done, and also, I appreciate the tool that we asked, what do you think we should do about public schools, and I really appreciate that you gave us an idea of a tool that we might use in order to do that, which I think that we weren't quite able to figure out on our own, and that it's because you are the expert staff that you are that you told us that. So thank you.
Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I would associate myself with Councilmember Fulcher's comments, and in particular, the colloquy that we had last week on the subject was very thoughtful. And I just wanted to say, in particular, I would imagine that the considered and weighty conversation that we had the day before the last planning board thing and the dynamic nature of our mayor at the planning board on some of these issues had to have paid some kind of dividends. So I just wanted to tell all of you that I appreciate you getting your proverbial acts together, in my opinion, so that you could be the counsel for this mayor that she deserves, and blah, blah, blah. Now, I do have a question, though, about the, and it's not a huge question, but it's technical, and I wanted you guys to kind of chart through it because it's the most important thing, because we've been talking about rules and recommendations. And I think that to some degree, the lawyer, the legal training in me wants to have a more clear conversation about the distinction between the legal definition of a recommendation as it pertains to both a resolution and the development or process or approvals process. Because the mind of a general person would be that if you're recommending something, you're not telling someone what to do. But I think that because there are some process-oriented places where recommendation means X versus rule, or it implies regulation versus something else, it'd be helpful to talk about all those R's, I think.
Sure, happy to. And I think maybe I'll start off, and Rosalie, you jump in. I'll kind of start off here with the point that we talked about last week, which is I think it's probably helpful to think about two different types of recommendations within the minor master plan itself. One are recommendations that the planning board has no control over the enforcement of, right? So those are recommendations for, consideration that the city or the county or MCPS or someone else, dedicate funding to X, Y, and Z thing or do something with their property, right? And so those are recommendations that, right, they're in a plan. We now all are going to, when that plan is adopted, as stakeholders work towards figuring out solutions to those, but they're,
It's like dicta in a case. Like you can say what you want, but it's not. It doesn't control.
Right. As we said with rent stabilization, the plan can say whatever it wants. It's up to the city to implement that. There's a distinction between those types of recommendations and recommendations that the planning board has authority and purview over within the development review process, right? And we pointed out a few of those here tonight. So let me give an example. The recommendation around that the developer of the Washington Adventist site explore a co-location of public facilities on the site, right? Weird example. I probably should have picked a different one, but let's run with this one for a second. So what a development review has to demonstrate, what a development plan has to demonstrate during site plan, during sketch plan, during development review process, is not just conformity with zoning, but as a portion of zoning, substantial conformity with any governing master plans for that area, right? So you can kind of think about it as, not to overstep my knowledge here, but those recommendations are a part of the zoning for better or worse, right? And so what that means, let's take this example. This is an additional bar that a development would have to clear during development review to demonstrate alignment with the master plan, right? So this recommendation doesn't mean that there have to be a co-located public facility on the site, but what it means is that when a proposal comes before the planning board that doesn't have a co-location of public facilities, the planning board's going to have to say, show us your work. Show us why that recommendation wasn't possible here. Show us why you have not acted upon that before we can give you approval to move forward here.
And so that's where I would like to just take the last part of this from a structural, procedural standpoint. This is the point at which we are talking about variance. So, can you describe the ease by which the variance process could be implemented on any given thing that is now recommended just for the benefit of the good of the order?
Sure. So just so I'm clear, so for example, if someone came with a proposal that didn't include
I think you could use your exact example.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So if the eventual sketch plan, site plan didn't have a co-located public facility, right? So I won't speak to kind of the planning board's
Total hypo.
determination.
Total hypo.
I won't speak to the planning board's process because it's their process. What I will say is that as part of the development review process, you also have a chance to weigh in. If it's a sketch plan, you have multiple chances to weigh in, right? And you have a chance to pass your resolution that says, we don't support this, and we don't support this because it didn't meet this recommendation within the plan, right?
Which procedurally would then trigger the options associated with our authority to make the planning board have to override what we say.
Correct.
Thank
They
you
would need to have a
very
two-thirds
much,
majority,
Ira.
yes.
Appreciate it.
And I do just want to kind of go back to
to that point, because I know that that is a question that has come up a lot in terms of basically by right, right? So if it's a zoning allowance and it's in the plan, then the developer by right can start at that point, right? And they could build to the ceiling, they could build to the max capacity, because they could develop a plan that would allow for that, right? And the recommendations don't have as much teeth, right? And so I just want to confirm that, like, the recommendations that relate to aspects of the zoning, like within the planning board, gives us additional rationale as a city to hold a planning board to requiring the developer to meet those recommendations, right? So it's easier for the board to get a 2/3 override when we're just saying, hey, this is just something Tacoma Park doesn't like. But if it is something that, no, this was a recommendation. So for example, on Maple Avenue, there's language that they've added that makes it very clear that we prefer residential, right? And so that then gives us a little bit more of teeth without necessarily limiting our flexibility, should we decide that we as a community want to make an exception, without limiting that ability. I'm just trying to make sure I understand, because as I was going through a lot of the guidance, some places they were a little stricter, other places it felt to me like they wanted to give us more flexibility in the future, but added some language that could kind of give us at least a little bit of pushback should something come before us that we wouldn't necessarily meet or want in the community. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think just to kind of broadly summarize my takeaways from the work sessions, we've talked about flexibility and the positives and negatives of flexibility, but it does seem like that this is a 20-year plan, right? And that, a recognition of that flexibility has been important to the planning board, right? So, yeah, within that flexibility, what are the recommendations that we are providing and the enforcement mechanisms that we're providing, to have additional protections and have what we want to see, so.
And if I would just add, as an example, the flexibility is key because we don't know what's going to get proposed. But imagine that a potential developer comes and says, we want to do more commercial, even though we recognize this is supposed to be predominantly residential. Say we want to do more commercial, and in that horse trading step in the process, we'll make a community park on the front side of the lot. And so the city and the planning board say, okay, so costs and benefits, right? Where are the trade-offs and what makes sense to the community to move forward? But you can't make those decisions if there isn't enough flexibility built into the structure that allows for that. And I'll just add one note, there is almost nothing in this plan that would develop by right, because almost every parcel abuts residential. This proposed CRT zoning would abut residential, and the code says when CRT abuts residential, it has to go through an optional development. And so there may be two small parcels where Lee and Maple intersect or something that don't actually abut residential, but virtually everything would go through an optional development. So the idea that something would happen that we wouldn't have a say in, or that it wouldn't, that it would go unexpectedly to the max in a way that we don't get any opportunity to weigh in, just is not realistic.
Can I just ask a quick clarifying question? Sure. Are multifamily considered residential in that definition of things abutting residential?
They are.
Okay.
The new zoning that would change all of the existing multifamily on Maple to CRT still abuts residential if it's another R zone.
And another point of clarification on that, when you were talking about the trade-offs, were you talking only about the Washington and Venice section, or were you also talking about Maple Avenue?
Also Maple Avenue. Okay. That's why the county staff kept emphasizing flexibility, because it's a way to get more of what the community wants in any given situation if we can look at trade-offs.
So although there is no public benefits, quote unquote, and sketch plan stage for most of Maple Avenue, that still applies, that notion that if you propose something, you can include.
Anything that goes through optional development has a requirement for public benefits.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gibson? Okay. Councilmember Gibson has a question. Okay,
Thank you.
so sorry. If you could text me, my handy dandy watch will vibrate and I will know that that's what you want.
Do I need to turn this back on?
No, I think we got it because we can't see his hand. Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Gibson.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to, on the screen there, this commercial and residential density thing. Actually, Councilmember Smalls might be better able to parse this, but the question, as I see, the point there is that, or the language is, the overall development patterns should remain primarily residential. Again, not a lawyer, but first of all, it's overall patterns. It's also should, and it also uses primarily. All of those terms to me are squishy, but so I don't think I remember any of the language that's been added uses the word must. So I guess I'm still very hesitant about how much real leverage we would have, even if it goes to a site development process. And I was glad to hear that all but one or two building sites would be required, would be using the optional development pattern, that there's only one or two that are by right. But anyhow, my point is, or my concern is, about the squishiness of the language.
Sure, and I just want to quickly clarify on the last point. I'll be, I feel comfortable being a little more assertive than Roz on this point. I feel very confident stating any parcel every parcel in the Maple Avenue district would have to go through optional method development, because abutting residential is not the only requirement for optional method development. The other requirement is that you are doing a development that is over 10,000 square feet or 1 FAR, and any development that we'd be looking at along Maple Avenue would exceed those definitions.
Thank you. And to the
Should
other
exceed
point,
those definitions.
And I think, and Councilmember Gibson, I don't want to take the floor from you, but I do think it might be helpful, because I think others may have some questions about like the commercial and residential densities, and
I just want to answer to the question, or
Sure.
if it can't be answered, then I'll do it offline.
Yeah, but I'll just briefly say that all of the I would have to read through it again with a fine-tooth comb, but I feel, again, pretty confident saying all the recommendations use the should language. So that might be, I will leave it up to council members to decide if they feel that is too squishy in your words, but that is kind of the convention of the recommendations here.
Okay, that's part of it. Thank you.
But I do want to kind of go back to this particular point of the commercial and residential densities and the language that's here, because I know, and Councilmember Stevens, I see your light. I don't want to steal your thunder.
I have no thunder, so go for it.
But I know that one of the concerns that was raised was around how the proposed zoning on Maple Avenue could potentially lead to 100% commercial spaces. And so one of the concessions that the planning board in their draft provided is this language. While the plan recommends a diversity of residential, non-residential land uses in the Maple Avenue district, the overall development pattern should remain primarily residential. And so the question, I guess this kind of goes back to the original question, right? Because it recommends, doesn't change necessarily the zoning allocation to provide us with a little bit more flexibility. But But the question remains on how much teeth is really behind something like this. Can you speak a little bit more to this particular language and ways in which we may want to provide a little bit more clarity as a condition, potentially?
You mean specifically about the 100% commercial possibility?
Correct.
As far as the use of language, I don't recall ever seeing the word must in this plan. I think that's a convention of how the county does plans like this. So even in terms of building height, it says the maximum building height should transition to a height for buildings fronting Flower Avenue, you know. I don't think that's more, I don't think that's squishy. I think it's laying out, this is what we're looking for, and we expect proposals that are coming in to adhere to this, to conform to this. And if they don't, then we have a discussion about why, but it's not a sure thing at all that would, you know, there would have to be some compelling offsetting difference. As far as the residential nature, I think to say that Maple Avenue is a residential community and they expect that it to continue to be primarily residential, I think it does have teeth. If someone came in with 100% commercial, in theory, yes, they could do that by the zoning. In practice, the minor master plan is what they have to meet now. They have to meet the master plan, and this gives more meat on the bones of what that looks like in today's world, 20 years on. And the first thing that'll happen is the staff and planning board will say, hold on a minute, this isn't what was intended. This wasn't what we envisioned. So I think that it's extremely unlikely, but I also think it's unlikely to be proposed, which is my opinion, but I'm also quite sure that it would have to go through a very robust discussion. They would have to convince city council and they would have to convince the planning board that they had a compelling reason to do that when the expectation is clearly stated that it's primarily residential area.
Thank you. Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. And I would just like to start out by thanking my esteemed colleague, Councilmember Small, for kicking off this discussion, and especially appreciate it because of his legal background. And I think he raised the question in a very good way to help clarify things. I also thank you for your presentation tonight and kind of the brevity of the presentation, and also the topics came out very quickly, as you saw, and also my other colleagues' interest in this subject. I appreciate that because I think this is vital to the neighborhood. I understand a little bit better after hearing the discussion, kind of the legality of the situation and kind of what where we go from rights to recommendations. I remain unconvinced that that solves or satisfies. It does not satisfy me that we've addressed this concern adequately for gaining our approval for the minor master plan. And give you a perspective of where I'm coming from on this is 20 years from now may sound like a long time, but having been on this council for 20 years, it's not so long, okay? And so I think we do need something that 20 years from now still looks pretty much like a residential neighborhood. And I'm concerned that with this, too much flexibility is provided. And whereas my first request or recommendation was that we insist on a downzoning from what is currently in the minor master plan, I think there's maybe a workable compromise to that request. And so I would propose that we ask this commercial and residential density statement read the overall development patterns should, I'm going to change it. The overall, right now it says the overall development patterns should remain primarily residential, and I would like to suggest that we change that to the overall development patterns shall remain at least 80% residential, or about approximately 80% residential. I would even be satisfied with that. So we give the flexibility that the planning board thinks is important. And in my comments earlier, I should have thanked the planning board, because I think they have addressed the concerns that this council has brought forward during the process and has addressed those in the recommendations in some cases. But again, I think it gives the developers too much flexibility with being able to say that they could have 100% commercial, and then the next developer comes along and says, well, they could have 100% commercial. I think that changing the requirement or the recommendation to be a little more restrictive would be a good compromise.
Councilmember Gibson?
Thank you. I just want to follow up on that. Terry, thank you for that consideration. I feel as if, again, that language change really doesn't change much. Whether some of the staff disagree, whether it's squishy or not, I'm sort of driven in a sense by language or suggestion that we don't allow something that we don't want to happen. That zoning, if we don't want to have half of a building commercial, it shouldn't be half of the building. I would like to propose, or I will be proposing, that the FAR for the Maple Avenue buildings be limited to FAR 1, which is just just rather than the so-called uniform, or what's the term that's been used. But anyhow, I think that would, we don't need to have, I don't think we want to have more than one FAR commercial, and that will do what you I think we all want, which is to maintain the residential character, and it would have real teeth.
Can I just clarify real quick, council member, when you say FAR of 1, you mean strictly for the C portion of the zoning designation?
The seed?
The C, I'm sorry. So again, it's CRT 2.5 C.
Yes, strictly for the C portion, yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
In other words, it's a residential area, and so primarily residential, but we would allow commercial of 1C, yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess before I give specific comments, can I just kindly clarify our structure of the rest of this conversation, since we don't have a lot of time remaining and we've spent a lot of time on this particular point? I feel like, am I correct that we only have about 10 minutes left? Yes. Okay. Are we going to go through them topic by topic, or are we, what's the plan?
Just one topic.
That's just topic.
His topic is what matters. So it sounds like we've already talked through a couple of topics. The schools, by my count.
Okay.
Making a statement regarding the schools, rent stabilization. I think this is another area where there's been some thoughts. So if there's another topic that you would like to bring up, what we're trying to do tonight is make sure that folks, again, because we got the markup today, and we had the spreadsheet, but wanting to make sure that folks had a firmer understanding of the proposed changes that were in the planning board draft as it relates to our recommendations, and whether or not there were any things that you had questions on or things that we really felt strongly weren't adequately addressed.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you for
sure.
clarifying. So with regard to this point, I strongly support my colleague Siemens, who represents, along with Essex House, the residents of Maple Avenue, and I think is very much in touch with what folks would like. So if, and I share many of the concerns of it, of the softness of the language and clarity on definitions. I'm not going to name any council member, but there was a case that was made to me by a fellow council member about the possibilities of what could happen on Maple Avenue if we left it more flexible. And the case was made that what if a potential employer came in or, different coffee interests or something like that were to happen and to expand on this street and to provide lots of local jobs where people didn't have to travel as far. It was an interesting case to me. It was still difficult for me to imagine a multi-story commercial building, and my own deference was towards greater control. I'm just laying that out there because those are some of the behind the dais conversations that have been had. I want to share that with the public. If the council member who brought that to my attention wants to discuss it more, feel free. But barring that, I just want to share that I would support the 80% residential possibly. If that conversation is more or less concluded, I would urge us to move on to possibly the discussion on the university hospital campus itself and some of that topic. Are folks comfortable moving on to that topic?
Sure, I will say I had that conversation.
Okay, good, 'cause
and
I didn't know, I couldn't remember, because I.
You said a grocery store?
Hypos and whatever.
So I said it. And it's because this is a 20-year plan, like the idea is that this is supposed to be for an extended period of time. And then the question then becomes the value of the flex, right? Do you want to limit yourself and not be able to take advantage of an opportunity that may be to the benefit of the community? But if you cut it off and you make it such that that zoning possibility is not there, I've heard from folks, like, if they have to go through county zoning in order to build, they're looking somewhere else. So if we are saying, hey, the hospital was our major employer, we lost them. We have Maple Avenue, which is a street that consists of a lot of our affordable housing where employment and employers could be beneficial. This is all make-believe. Like, we're all reading tea leaves at this point. But for me, it was, do we necessarily want to completely, like, is the recommendation enough to be able to say, if someone's coming in, and I hate to say this out loud, but someone comes in and they want to just build a 10-story office building that doesn't have or serve any real public purpose, you want to be able to say no, but you also want to make sure that there's some flexibility to where if someone comes to you with the right type of project, that you may be able to say yes. And I think that's the juxtaposition that is running through my mind, particularly in this space where I'm like, I need the recommendation to have enough teeth for me to say no, but I don't want to change the zoning to the point where nothing will be that won't even be an option for consideration. And I think that kind of goes back to, these are some of the juxtapositions and the challenges that we're all trying to deal with, so that you can make sure that you have an ability to get some of the stuff that could really be beneficial, but be able to clearly turn down the stuff that's not for the public good. And I think that's the piece.
May I have a quick follow-up?
Sure.
I would just say that I think that the change that I proposed provides that flexibility without having us turn the residential neighborhood into a commercial neighborhood.
Right.
And,
You're next.
okay, thank you.
I will go back to you, because I know you weren't back.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say that theoretically, I do think that that there could be a middle path here with the FAR if we were just specific about the fact that we were concerned about verticality. And if we condition the verticality, but still made it possible to have the same floor plan restrictions, then we could end up with maybe more horizontal buildings that are in line aesthetically, give an opportunity for more architectural design components. And some of the buildings, I remember really early on when we were talking about running, one of the people who came in was talking about his building and his desire, a Ward 1 person, I believe, who desired to keep his building as affordable in Ward 1 because of the architectural components of it and whatever. And I went and looked at it, and it's a pretty big building. And so, like, the thought is that, you know, perhaps maybe if there is some consideration given to some of the historical patterns with regard to verticality and or the footprint of the hospital actual building itself, that maybe there's some value there in making sure and retaining that along the Adventist site that we have some sort of aesthetic buffer that still provides us with an opportunity for density. With regard to the Maple Avenue issues, I really think, you know, we could probably do the same thing, because if we were to require vertical restriction on commercial properties or augmentations, and then at some point in the future we get electric cars or something, you know, exogenous thing that makes it possible to conceive of that space with a different kind of commercial density, then they could seek a variance at the county level or at the appropriate level. But we would have still made the attempt to make sure that aesthetically, you know, it's just like when little kids draw cities. They don't draw the buildings the same height. And so it gives us an opportunity to have some sort of design reflected in the area. And my suggestions would be to consider the FAR being relatively the same, but with a conditional aspect on heights.
Heights for commercial?
Yeah. I just want to
Heights for
clarify.
commercial on that parcel, and then at the Adventist site, like some reasonable reflection of the fact that there's a university there and whatever else, I think would dictate not being too tall, is what I would say.
Sure, I just want to clarify very briefly that we are not zoning experts or officers, but based on my understanding of zoning law, the mapped height is the maximum height. You cannot create different heights for different uses. The mapped height is the mapped height. And when we talk about optional method development, what we're talking about is additional density, not additional height. The only way you can exceed the mapped height is by offering additional affordable units, or I believe public facilities, but literally government facilities, right? Those are the two ways.
Real quick,
So-
Ira, just for this, the sake of the cheap seats, although this accommodation chair is actually all that. It actually was cheap. Anyway, can you explain then what that means with regard to vertical heights potentially, given what's reasonable with FARs in this plan for both the Adventist site and along Maple and potentially Flower? Just off the rip, what it is.
Sure. So I think just being conscious of time here, this is kind of a pretty meaty topic. I'd maybe propose that we could send you and post publicly kind of a full write down of zoning height and how all of that works.
Because I think that's really where the rubber hits the road here. If we could just know and we could disseminate what it says, then people would know. And in the grand scheme of things, if some of the changes that we discussed today were made with the knowledge of what that is actually, what these other things may potentially actually mean, it would make for a more reasonable discussion of that final vote, in my opinion. I know that's prescient, but like I want a reasonable document.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to Councilmember Honzak because I know we kind of got derailed a little bit, but I
That's
do want
okay.
to go
Well,
back to your point.
we're touching on where I wanted to go, and maybe you don't want to go there. We had, just for the public to know, Assistant Director Keller and I had a fairly extensive conversation about exactly what it would mean to go above the height limits. And now I'm talking about topic number 1, the scale of the future development in the Flower Avenue district in the adjacencies alongside the neighborhood and the single family and residential buildings. So currently the CR zone, which is the university and the hospital, has a height limit of 120 feet. And the CRT, which is along Flower Avenue and also behind, it's along Flower Avenue and there's a piece also along Maplewood, is 70 feet. And then there's some pieces that have a 55-foot limit. So the CRT has a optional benefit of, I think it's a 50-point value if you do the optional method, whereas the CR zone has this optional benefit of 100. It's double the public benefits. So I'm putting this out in the public, and if you'll just maybe provide the simplest answer you can. What do you think of us specifying more clearly via our next resolution, this is just an idea, I'm not saying this is what I necessarily want to do, that we might whether we might desire CRT versus CR for the hospital or university campus? Are we more likely to get more public benefit that way and still stay within a reasonable height that is more in line with the neighboring homes? And could the university still thrive and afford to redevelop if we did that? Does that?
Sure. So let me.
Does everybody follow the nature of my question?
No.
No?
Ira, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I think I can touch on a few pieces, and if I miss something, you can maybe ask me a follow-up. The first thing I'll say is I do just want to point folks to a blog that we did put on the website around kind of what are CR zones and what are the differences between the zones, because public benefit requirements is one piece, but there's a lot of other differences between those zones, including uses that you could put on those zones, right? So I just think it's important to kind of consider that totality. The zones themselves within those CR zones, the heights that are laid out here could fall within any of those zones. So I think you could probably view height independent from the zone category as long as you're within those CR categories themselves. And
so, but it is my understanding that the maximum height, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the slide right now. I'm doing this off the top of my head. The maximum height for CR zones goes up to is it 300 feet?
Sure, but the max height here is just 120.
I'm sorry?
But the max height here is just 120.
Right, but so my understanding, and forgive me if this is incorrect, is that if, for example, Adventist University, as they purchase the land, were to say we would like to build MPDUs, and 12.5%, for example, and therefore, can we go above the 120-foot height requirement? That would be considered to be an optional benefit, and therefore, they might, that would be part of their proposal, that they would go above the 120-foot height, and that would partially be motivated, let's say, by that CR value. And that in theory, although I don't think it would happen, they could go up even higher as per the guideline. That is my understanding, and pardon me if that is incorrect.
Sure. So let's just talk about the heights real quickly. And again, as I always say, none of us are zoning experts, but so real quickly, the mapped height is the mapped height. If the mapped height is 120 feet, that is the highest development you can do, standard method, optional method. The only exceptions to that, the only way you can exceed that mapped height within an optional method development are twofold. One, like we talked about with the Recreation Center RFP, you could offer a little public facility, right? I forget the term in the zoning code, but a government use, right, within that building. That density doesn't count towards your overall density. The only other way is through the offering of MPDUs. A site here would have to offer a minimum 12.5% MPDUs flat. That is the county law. If they exceeded that 12.5%, there is a formula for additional density that you can add. That formula is the same for all the CR zones. That formula does not give you infinite height. It caps at a certain point. It caps at a certain density, and then you translate that density to height. So no, there would not be a 300-foot building even if you maximized that MPDU height. I'm not at liberty to do the full breakdown right now. I'm sure we could try and do some sort of breakdown, but there were a few pieces of the question, so let me just get that one first, and then you can get me the next piece.
Okay, no, so then, just for the sake of argument, we're trying to maximize public benefit. That was clearly one of the priorities. So if we were to suggest very strongly that we wanted this, because maybe we're not that comfortable with the concept of going above 120 feet, and I'm speaking on behalf of many Ward 5 residents, then would CRT, what would be the drawbacks of being very firm and saying we would instead like to see CRT, knowing that that gives us a lot less, half the amount of optional benefits? What would be some of the potential drawbacks of that?
Yeah, so
because it might motivate. Some
I want Ross to answer in a
Yeah.
second here. I just want to put one piece, which is this is where my caveat is most important, that we are not zoning experts. You know, there are a lot of things that go into these various zones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what our focus is about making sure that the plan itself is true to the values and goals that we have. And I have faith that the planning board staff and the planning board in their analysis of these zones have taken into account all of that in looking at the appropriate zones. The other important piece to talk about with the hospital campus as a whole is about the sketch plan requirement and how that impacts the entire site. And so I'll let Roz touch on that piece.
I was just going to say, my understanding is that the sketch plan is required as part of a CR zone. It is not required as a part of the other CR family zones, the CRT or CRN. The importance of that is that as much as possible, and I think city and county and planning staff and county planning board would push extremely hard on this, to see the whole picture, to get a sense of whoever owns the property, it may be more than one owner, but that when something comes forward, when a preliminary plan comes forward, we see it in context, so that there is a sense of what the traffic analysis is and the school impact and environmental and what that means for the community. The new language in the red line version also includes that the sketch plan have a traffic analysis, so that we get additional information, not just at each development review as the individual buildings come through, but we see the bigger picture.
Councilmember, okay. There are other lights, Councilmember Small, so I need you to wait. Councilmember DeBala, do you have a follow-up point to what was just discussed
On this point,
on this point?
do I? I don't think so.
Okay.
I wanted to switch topics.
Okay. Councilmember DeBala, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I did want to switch topics and just say a couple of things that I would be interested in a resolution. Going back to this section, the question, going back to Maple Avenue and going, well, first, sticking with the Adventist area, I think the resolution should affirm that we want certain things, that we think they're there, just echoing that we want to make sure they really are there. One of them would be this concept with sketch plan, with the sketch plan. And turning back to Maple Avenue, however, I've heard 3 different ways of talking about the commercial potential zoning. So whatever way we land on, just that we don't want Maple Avenue to turn into a commercial zone. But also to a point that many residents have brought up, I would like to see a condition that, a statement that we don't plan to change our rent stabilization 5 years anytime soon. Maybe I'm the only one who feels that way, but I would like to put that out there. And to the point of potential displacement and being concerned for all of our residents, particularly our low-income multifamily residents, I go back to our 3 goals from our housing and economic development plan to preserve what we've got, to produce more, and to protect our residents. So in that context, affordable and quality multifamily. Right now we have affordable, but maybe not so much quality. So I want to affirm some of the stronger statements that they have made about net loss and displacement. I do think, having looked at this pretty closely, that it, within the context of a plan for zoning, they've probably pushed that part as far as they can, but there are things that I think we as a city and county need to think about doing that are not zoning. So I would like to ask for a follow-up work session to our housing conversation a couple months ago to specifically ask staff to look at what are the things we still need to do. We have the zoning, we have the toolkit, we know what the programs are that the county has, we know what we have. Is there something missing? Is there something we need to do? Whether it's a displacement, I know it may not be a displacement ordinance, it may be instead talking about some kind of tenant protections for when buildings are renovated. I don't know what it is, but I think we need to do it. And that might have been my last but not least for now. Just make sure, give me 1 minute. I had wanted to acknowledge resident comments and hearing from both sides in Ward 2 and in the middle. So just wanted everybody to know that. But my concerns, so to summarize, I'd like to see affirmation of some things. I'd like to see something, something about rent stabilization. And I'd like to see something about our steps on protections for residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Honzak?
I guess I did want to say, because I was asking so many questions, I first want to affirm the fact that I am extremely, exceedingly pleased by the fact that we have Hospital Hill designated in the plan and that we have an open public space of open to flower, and which is what a lot of professors were asking for on the university. And I think it's very beneficial to the community, historic legacy, and the neighborhood and open space access, and the at least 1/2 acre. So I just want to say that so that it doesn't sound like I'm all negative and cynical about things. And I'm very pleased also about the new language about co-located public facilities. I had some, since we have Roz and Ira here and the public, could I go back again to page 101 that you brought to our attention? It is not very clear to me what this specific redlined version means when it says, along Maplewood Avenue, the maximum building height should conform to the compatibility requirements of the zoning ordinance. Is it just saying it should do what it's supposed to do, or is that going above and beyond what was already there?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and let me just kick off here. My interpretation of a lot of the conversation at the last work session was that, again, to what a plan can do and a plan can't do, zoning has rules. And you can't just change some of those rules in certain places, right? And one of those things are setback requirements, right? And so what the plan is doing is outlining what setback requirements are. And I know we've had some discussions about that. The plan now includes some images talking about what that looks like and outlining what that looks like when abutting specifically residentially zoned properties. And so, yeah, my reading of this is kind of affirming and re-emphasizing what those setbacks need to look like as per zoning, right? Which is kind of what
Okay,
can
so
be
it's
done
nothing,
here.
it's nothing as different than the zoning ordinance itself, which is in this zone, to be clear, again, for those listening, it is currently along Maplewood. It is currently zoned R60 primarily, and therefore the setbacks on either side, even on the hospital side under the CR zoning, would be 25 feet on each side, as discussed with your department. That's per code. And I just want to put that, so imagine it's going to be more than 50 feet, 25 feet on either side. Setbacks are matching on both sides. We dug into that somewhat. It is a very helpful piece of information because that's where we're imagining the green promenade. And I just think it's important for the public to sort of hear that loud and clear because it's not clearly delineated except in the slides, if you go deep in your slides, which is great. That was really helpful. I don't know if we're going to find closure today on the dais about the CRT issue. I don't know how you want to handle that, Mayor, while we're all together.
Sure. So I want to provide my statements first,
please.
and then I can talk
Thanks.
about next steps. So one, I want to overall just say that I think that the planning board and planning staff really did, as I went through a lot of their comments, as I went through the materials, they really pushed the limit in a number of spaces as far as they could technically go within their sphere of authority. The displacement language that they added really went that extra step. That no net loss language really went the extra step. What they could do in terms of public space and the preservation of the public space, particularly in the locations that we were emphasizing, they went that extra step. But I also think that there are some things that, frankly, we were asking for in our resolution where the onus falls on us and the county. And so it does seem like there are certain places where we can use this resolution, one, to address the plan, but I think it's important for us to kind of silo these things, right? So what are the things that definitely relate to zoning that we want to be concrete about, we want to see changed in the plan, and that makes sense? And then what are the things that maybe relate to the city and our authority? So for example, I've already said, hey, I want to look at our pilots, our process or lack thereof. I want to look at how we're using CDBG funds to make sure that we have monies available to create the incentives for the types of development that we want to see. How are we using our housing reserve? We just did aspects of our displacement ordinance, but what do we need to do more? Those are things that are clearly within the city's purview to influence and direct and incentivize the type of development that we want to seek, because it all comes in one good old financial stack in order to kind of bring in what you want. Because otherwise, this is just a plan that's going to sit on a shelf and nothing's going to happen if you don't have the necessary incentive structure in place to incentivize what it is you want to see. And then you have these other things that truly are county, right? The schools, for example. We got caught in the matrix. County staff, the planners were telling us, oh, well, that'll be addressed in the CIP. We get the CIP, and they say, oh, that's going to be addressed in the plan. And the planners are like, what are you talking about? They never gave us any comments on this. This is what they told us. And so now we're in this loop-de-loop. So we need to be very explicit, and this is something that needs to be explicitly communicated to the county council because they approved the CIP, right? So how do we make sure that we are pushing the right things to the right stakeholders that actually have the ability to give us what we want? And so I think that overall, there's a few places that has come out of this meeting. I think there's a couple places where we're all in agreement we need to push back, but it's clear that these issues may be outside of the planning board's authority. So the school piece, we push back. We want them to say something a little bit more specific in the plan, but that's going to involve MCPS and that's going to involve the county, and we just need to get ready to fight. The the rent stabilization, I'm not negotiating on that. Take it out. It's ours. That's it. But there are a couple of places where, like we talked about tonight, the promoting the CRT zone and commercial, and then the questions that have been raised about the Advantage site, where it sounds like it would be beneficial for us to start putting together some potential language which might work in terms of a condition that we would want to circulate with the council. So it sounds like what would be beneficial. It seemed like there were still quite a few questions, and we had committed to providing some more information around the zoning categories and what's allowable in which spaces. So if we can get that to council and get some of that information to the public so that piece is clear. But also if we can start having some conversations around what a potential condition language would look like. That, because I think the challenge is that, you know, there's this weird space of what the condition would look like within the ability that we have and within the zoning laws that are there, which may be a little bit more challenging to fully flush out amongst council, and it would be beneficial for staff, based on what you've heard, to give us some condition language to noodle over.
Yeah, that would be great.
That sounds great, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to throw one other item for consideration as you guys think about language that staff just wanted to point out. So first of all, I just want to summarize the ones that you pointed out. I'm missing anything. So I heard schools, rent stabilization, the kind of multiple proposals around C versus R, and I think maybe I also heard around the zoning on the Adventist campus, whether that's maybe adding some more information and then potentially some language change. The only other one I wanted to...
Vertical height memo, email.
Yep, so I'm sorry, I was including that within that last one. The only other thing I wanted to mention is when we talk about displacement and protections, I just wanted to include one other thing for consideration. You know, I think as staff have said before, you know, we don't have a ton of concerns about kind of imminent threat of displacement and kind of redevelopment along Maple Avenue. But we do kind of see the potentially, you know, highest risk properties there actually being some of the condominium properties, specifically Hilltop, right? That if there is a property that there might be some redevelopment potential in the future, you know, that is a property that has some challenges, is not kind of developed to the highest potential density. And so one other kind of piece of language we wanted to consider within those conditions was that if the housing resource list that's being proposed within the plan could specifically call out both existing protections and kind of needed protections for individual condominium owners and individual condominium, whether they are residents or whether they are renting their property, in the event of kind of condominium sales, right? So just kind of making sure that those resources are explicitly called out for those types of properties within that resource list.
Quick follow-up question. So when we're talking about condo sales, it's the entirety of the building, not individual units within them. Just want to make sure that that point is clear.
Correct. And there's a process and there's kind of laws governing how that process has to work, right? And the rights of individual condo owners. And so again, the plan wouldn't change any of that, but we do think that it's kind of important that that housing resource list make sure that it includes those resources as well.
I have, Mayor.
Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor, and I really appreciate this. There's only one last thing that is supremely important to me that I thought maybe we would talk about later. In the draft language, when it discusses the history of the city, it is so poorly done with regard to the discussion of the development of the community, what is basically a discussion of probably an enslaved person. And then there's no real mention of the policies of the Federal Housing Administration or segregation in there. Specifically, we're talking about page 9 and 10 of the draft. I don't, that it's discourteous to write things in that way. and it presupposes kind of a paternalistic attitude toward both the community and the diversity here, specifically since we are a majority minority community. And I would really like it if somebody talked to them about it.
Sure, I think some of those kinds of language discussions can be had on kind of a staff-to-staff level. So, maybe we can reach out and get some feedback from you and share that on the staff level.
Great, thank you. So, in terms of next steps, I think everyone has their marching orders. And so the hope is that we'll be able to have some language for the resolution and proposed conditions that can be agreed upon next week.
Do you want to set a time for when individual council members need to have language to you if they're going to propose it?
Thank you. If you are going to propose any language, when can we get the conditions, the draft conditions language?
Yeah, so traditionally our goal is to kind of get something posted by Friday, if at all possible. So we're kind of tight here. I'm looking at Roz, but she'll be on vacation. So yeah, I would say if you can get them by the end of this week, that would be fantastic, and we can have something back to you.
Yeah, I think folks need to see the proposed language.
I understand,
and
yes.
then
Yeah, we can get something to you by end of day tomorrow, kind of based on this discussion, and then await your feedback, I suppose.
Okay, perfect. So if everyone can make sure that when it comes through, you provide your feedback by COB Friday. I know it's a quick turnaround, but that's the only way we can make sure that we are able to post the materials in time for public.
And we also have another due date on Friday.
Yes, we do. Yep, we do. Yep, we do. All right, I think that's it. So.
So moved.
All right, so do we have, so we have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate everybody tonight. Have a good night.